Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Jones. Welcome to Interchange. Thank you so very much for joining us. Lots to talk about this week. Should the Plan B birth control pill be available to anyone at any time without any questions? We'll talk about more bad news for the Milwaukee School District when it comes to test scores compared with other big cities. And we'll talk about a proposal to let judges sentence juvenile offenders to Shakespeare instead of a real penalty. And we will also talk about the changes we can expect to see in the Milwaukee Brewers roster next year. All right, let me introduce everybody. We have newspaper columnist Joel McNally, Gerard Randall, education consultant and local job creation expert, Denise Calloway, the coordinator of business and community partnerships for the Milwaukee Public School System. Rick Horowitz will be along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, the first thing we're going to talk about is the Plan B morning after contraception pill. It's a major dose of hormones a woman can take to possibly prevent pregnancy, usually the day after unprotected sex. Right now, it's available without a prescription to those 17 and older, but it's behind the counter, so you have to ask for it. Well, the FDA had suggested that it be made available to everyone and put on the shelf just like condoms. The Obama administration this week overruled the FDA for the first time and said, leave things the way they are and leave it behind the counter. Is this politics, Denise, overruling the doctors and the scientists at the FDA? Whether you agree with it or not, is it politics rather than science?
Well, I really think it's a dose of common sense. The morning after pill, Plan B, is very, very different from a condom. It is designed, there are hormones that are going into a woman's body, powerful doses of hormones. If you take a look at the list of possible side effects from this, the side effects are significant and severe. So I think to have it available to young women 17 and older, to have it behind the counter is the right thing to do because it is a powerful drug. I don't think that there are many people who would want a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old or a 12-year-old to have access to that kind of potential harm that can be caused to them by that without an adult, a parent, guardian, someone who's engaged in that discussion and making sure and watching out for the welfare of that child. I mean, if you think about it, a young teenager, whose their minds aren't fully formed, which, part of the reason they're looking for Plan B is because they didn't have a Plan A and they had unprotected sex. They're just not going to pay attention to what may be happening to their body that's adverse where they need to seek medical help. So I think it's common sense to keep things the way they are. It's still available, it's still accessible, but if you're younger than 17, you're going to have to go see a physician for that help, and I think that's what you need to do.
I found it mind-boggling that the FDA would even approve something like this for anybody.
I don't find it mind-boggling at all. I hardly ever disagree with Denise, and I hardly ever disagree with the Obama administration. You guys know that. I disagree absolutely with both Denise and Kathleen Sebelius, the head of Health and Human Services. When Denise talks about horrible side effects for 11-year-olds or 12-year-olds or 14-year-olds, I can't think of a worse horrible side effect than pregnancy. As a consequence of unprotected sex. This drug has been studied scientifically by the medical community, by the Food and Drug Administration for years, and in fact it was under the Bush administration when they first started recommending making it widely available. Plan B, a day after pill, is a wonderful option for the people who made all the wrong decisions, who had the unprotected sex, and especially children, especially young children. The truth of the matter is, the people who are mostly opposed to this getting wider distribution, it's this strange, irrational, sort of anti-abortion lobby, which they say they're against abortion, but clearly they are also against stopping unwanted pregnancies. It has always boggled my mind that anyone who's opposed abortion would oppose contraception, and this particular contraception form, which is a day after, to protect you after you've done something that was stupid, after you've done something that you hadn't thought about, And you know, when Kevin's on this program, he always says abstinence never fails. Well, abstinence frequently fails. Children, you know, fail to be abstinent when they claim they're going to be. And the worst thing about, you know, when they go through these abstinence-only courses in school is they try to scare them out of using condoms. So in fact, you know, they're more likely to have unprotected sex than people who have had a comprehensive sex education where they learn about condoms and they learn about safe sex. The medical people and the scientific people who studied this drug, and any drug that we take, any of the drugs that we buy out of the drugstores, if you wanted to actually read all those horrible, you know, side effect things that they throw at you, because they throw every possible thing that could possibly happen, the scientific community says for this drug, whatever the side effects the remote side effects might be, and they're considered very low risk, this is a low risk drug, are nowhere near what the side effects are for a child who becomes pregnant.
But I think a big concern that a lot of people have is not only what are the side effects of the drug on a young girl's body, but does it make it more acceptable to have casual sex for a 14-year-old if you know you can run to Walgreens or CVS and get the day after pill?
But I do believe that that is a factor, that if it is on the counter and you've got people who are prone to making bad decisions to begin with, the availability of it, I mean, you should hear some of the things that come out of the mouth of young people, particularly those under the age of 16, that just cry out for having some responsible adult helping them to make better decisions. So I think the accessibility of it is a big concern. I also think, though, that there was a political dimension to this as well.
Sure
We're bordering into an election year. No one wants to bring up the abortion issue. Certainly they don't want it to be ramped up into this campaign as a significant factor. So for a whole lot of reasons, most of the reasons that Denise had talked about, I agree with, but I also think that there is the concern that young people just need to have more responsibility and guidance when accessing that particular treatment.
Two quick points. One is this is not an abortion pill.
I understand.
This is a pill that prevents either ovulation or the fertilized egg attaching to the uterus and becoming alive. So it's not an anti-abortion pill. The other thing is, when you say freely available, the cost is something like $50 a pill. This is not something that a child would just run to the drugstore and get willy-nilly and you know, every time, you know, plan on having sex and then unprotected and then run to the drugstore the next day. That's not even an issue.
All right, next topic. Another bad report card for the Milwaukee Public Schools this week. The results, reading and math test scores, were near the bottom when compared to other big cities, and there's been little improvement since the last round of testing back in 2009. MPS says it has a whole bunch of new programs in place right now, and that turning this around is a huge job that's going to take some time. Denise, I've heard officials from MPS say that repeatedly in the last few weeks about different subjects, that we're taking the steps now, but is this what administrations have said 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago?
I think there's a big difference, and that is if you take a look at 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we, first of all, didn't have the leadership that we have now with Dr. Thornton, someone who has a clear vision for what needs to be done, who's not afraid, as we've seen from board meetings this past week that have lasted well into the early morning hours about making tough decisions about closing schools that need to be closed and making those recommendations to the board. So first of all, you've got someone who has the vision and, more importantly than that, the absolute drive to make things better for kids in the city. Another big difference is we now are, as a district, becoming more centralized in some of those key academic areas that 5 and 10 years ago that we weren't. Schools were able to kind of go out and pick what they wanted to do and do it in a decentralized system. And you know what we've seen is what we're seeing now from those test scores. That did not work. So to have a comprehensive literacy plan, which is something that I don't know how long it's been since the district has had that, is a key piece to making this work and improving achievement for kids, in large part because of the incredible mobility rate that exists in the district. 36% of the kids who start school at the beginning of the year in one school finish it in another school. So you've got to have a vision, you've got to have a plan, you've got to implement that plan. All of those things are things that are being done now, and you have to be dogged about doing it and holding people accountable. So I think that's one thing that's very, very different. So around reading, there's the comprehensive literacy plan, and around math and science, we now have a comprehensive math and science plan where teachers are being trained and they're getting professional development, and that's rolling out. Now, the problem is, I think we tend to have this, as a community, a little bit of a myopic view to say, oh my gosh, these scores are bad. Well, the problem is if we take a look at what's been happening to our children, and we need to own them as our children, over the past 15, 20 years, there's been a downward spiral that has coincided with the rise of poverty in this city. Now, poverty is not an excuse for anything. But the reality of it is, if you don't know where you're going to live, if you don't know where your next meal is going to come from, your parents are focused on those things and perhaps not as focused as we want them to be or as engaged as we want them to be in their education. We're not where we want to be. We don't, nobody's doing cartwheels saying, whoo-hoo, we beat Detroit. We're committed to making sure that we improve opportunities for kids and that we improve achievement. But there are two big realities here. It is not going to be done overnight. And the other one is we're going to need the help of the community to get it done.
And what do you say to the people who might criticize MPS and say, we spend boatloads of money on this school district every single year, and it appears, based on test scores, that nothing they're doing is working?
We've had, in the last 25 years, about 7 superintendents. Each one has had a different vision. Each one has had different circumstances under which they've been able to exercise their leadership. Each one has had different resources that they can apply. There have been certainly as many different leaders at the state level in DPI. We didn't have 7, but we've certainly had at least 3 different leaders since '85. I think people tend to forget the dynamics that are involved in running these large districts and just how fluid every educational situation tends to be. One of the things that I think is kind of problematic for Dr. Thornton as he comes in, he's coming in and trying to right a ship with an entirely different set of tools to work with. He's got fewer teachers to work with. There's the formula for funding the schools that's different than most of the superintendents that he's had to work with. He's got certainly a community that is in deeper poverty than it's been if you go back that 25 years. And the expectation that the community has because of the frustration is that you turn this whole thing around in a year and all of a sudden you're up in the clouds with your academic achievement. I just think that it's going to take a little bit of patience. We're hoping that we get a chance to keep his leadership for better than 3 years because there will then be another change in leadership and vision and resources. And who knows, maybe the halt will then take place in the success that we're now starting to enjoy in some areas like early math or early reading.
Can any administration, no matter who it is, counter all the problems that MPS faces because of the community it's in? The poverty and the mobility of students?
I don't think any administration can without a whole lot more resources. And that's, people are talking about leadership, they're talking about vision, they're talking about programs, and we need all of those. All that No Child Left Behind did with all these tests morning, noon, and night was show how bad the situation is here, not just here. Yeah, these numbers here are bad, and they're bad all across the country in urban school districts. Education itself hasn't figured out how to tackle the achievement gap, hasn't figured out how to educate black males in poverty or anybody else in poverty. And to the extent that anybody comes up with solutions, we need to put a whole heck of a lot more money into those solutions and build on what works anywhere. You know, best practices anywhere, bring them here, the best practices we have here, build on them. And that takes a lot more resources instead of what we have right now coming from the state and this administration, the deepest cuts in education in the country. You know, so why is it any surprise that we have some of the worst scores here with and you said in your intro something about boatloads of money going into MPS. Clearly, these boatloads of money aren't enough. We need more boatloads, and we need semi-trucks, and we need, you know, every other vehicle full of money that we can get into this district, and that means the private industry has to step up, but especially because the state government is robbing MPS specifically, aiming specifically at the district with the worst problems and the poorest population, and hitting them the hardest in you know, all the resources it's taking away instead of giving. So we have to have the financial community and the business leadership join with Denise and anyone else at MPS. And we need more money coming in from the federal government. We need more money coming in from every foundation, and we need it all, because that's the resources are the only thing that's going to solve it.
All right, next topic. Not one, but two Milwaukee Public Board committees have approved a plan to spend $65,000 on a program which would allow judges to sentence some juvenile offenders to Shakespeare training instead of a traditional penalty. Now, supporters say this wouldn't be for the real bad kids, just good kids who happen to fall in with the wrong crowd at the wrong time. Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark said it's one of the stupidest ideas he's ever heard, but I think it might be right behind the bike path on the Hone Bridge, because I think he said that was the stupidest idea too, I think he said.
Well, it would be hard to put either of these on a list and have them ranked down at the bottom as clever ideas. The problem I have with this is that when you talk to a lot of kids that are first-time offenders, kids that have made minor mistakes in their lives, and then they're sent to some type of program to redirect them, and that's what this program is supposed to be. It leaves some kids with the notion that in order to participate in something good, and I think having kids participate in something that would include Shakespeare and writing plays and participating in the performance of plays, I think all that's good stuff. But the kids that are the good kids see a resource that should be applied to them, applied to someone that steps out of the main. And we can count a whole lot of programs that are beneficial to young people, but the perception of some is that you got to be bad before you can access those programs. And that's the biggest thing that I have with this program. It's a good thing for kids, but the money shouldn't be spent for kids that, even those that modestly go wrong, it can just be better applied.
Denise, is this another one of those, well, it's a good idea, but with things so tight, this is not the time to be spending money on a program like that?
Well, I think the concept of trying to do something that gives kids a way to kind of write their path without putting them into that criminal justice system that some of them never get out of is not a bad idea. Now, we can laugh whether or not it should be or not be Shakespeare or whatever, but I think we have to take a look at, with some kids, finding a way to look at alternatives other than just the hammer. And if this is an option, and people can chuckle about it or laugh about it, or some people can say it's one of the dumbest ideas they've ever heard. I'll tell you, I've heard ideas that are a lot worse than this. I think we have to figure out a way to try to help our young people to see that if you fall, there's still a way for you to get back up. And I just think it's short-sighted for us as a society, both in the human capital that it costs us, in terms of what happens to these kids when they start down that path in the criminal justice system, plus the money that it costs us. It's as expensive, if not more expensive, to house a kid in a juvenile facility than it is to send him to college. So the idea of looking at something else that gives kids an alternative, that maybe takes them into a different place in their life, I think it's something that's worth trying.
But if a kid grabs a lady's purse at the shopping mall, shouldn't the kid be punished and not be sent to Shakespeare training?
I don't know. If he got sent to Shakespeare training and he got interested in the arts and got interested in doing something positive, I don't think he'd be out there grabbing any more purses. I think he might well have a better life and a future for himself. My biggest complaint about this program isn't, anything I've heard much yet. It's that they said it wouldn't be available for the worst of these kids. Why not? I mean, those are the kids that need more alternatives and more options and more opening up of their lives, because they haven't had very many positive things in their life, which is probably why they're where they are and doing what they're doing. I'm not real impressed that David Clark says in today's press release that this is the stupidest thing. He puts out press releases every day. His opinion,
two a day.
His opinion on one thing. He put out a press release when some woman gave him a finger when he was driving, and he put out a press release on it. Apparently, I think he's become a bit of a joke himself because of that. But they have surplus money they're using, and any positive alternative, and particularly I think for the kids who are in the worst trouble. You know what? Don't these kids need to go to prison or something? We've seen how well that works. That is probably the end of those kids' lives. That is probably, guarantees that they will never do anything positive again. Because as Denise said, once you get in the criminal justice system, sometimes you never can get out.
Well, and
Okay,
it doesn't work.
we only have a minute to talk about it,
Right.
but we have to talk about the Brewers for just a minute, because a lot of things might happen in the coming few days. With everything that's happened with the Brewers and K-Rod and the possibility of Prince Fielder and Albert Pujols, do you think there's any chance at this point in time that we'll still get Prince?
Probably not. I mean, we're spending more money on all these things we're doing, getting upgrading at shortstop, and boy, some people were kind of complaining that we were going to get K-Rod back. I think having two closers and, once you're ahead in the seventh inning, you're automatically going to win the game. That was one of the beauties of the second half of last season, and I don't feel bad at all that K-Rod's coming back for another year. But it looks like, we're going to probably spend some more money at third base too. So I just don't see that the money is going to be available for Prince, especially after Pujols, got $250 million, and Prince is looking for something over 200 if he can get it.
The story the other day, though, about the phone call when Melvin and Attanasio were having dinner from Prince's agent, that got everybody going, oh, maybe they are working out a deal for $245 million.
Well, I'm a believer. I think the Pujols deal sucked a lot of wind out of Major League Baseball, because people began to take a look at just what else is out there in terms of free agents and all those other positions where you're just going to see these salaries just soar to unbelievable heights. And some effort may be made to maybe make an example of Fielder's compensation going forward by saying, you know what, that deal got done with Pujols. We're somehow or the other going to try to tamp this down.
All right. The worlds of entertainment and politics seem to get more alike every single day, all the time. But every once in a while, somebody still remembers the difference. And when that happens, well, even a celebrity can find himself hard up for apprentices. Here to explain it all, Rick Horowitz. Rick?
Hey, you can't blame a guy for trying, can you? Of course not. Not even if he's Donald Trump. See, the Donald thought he had another shot at the spotlight, and the Donald exists for the spotlight. He isn't fully alive unless he's got dozens of cameras pointed at him and millions of people hanging on his every word. I almost said his every thought, but that would require thinking. Never mind. Anyway, this debate of his, you just know Trump jumped in because Herman Cain was spinning out. Once Mr. 999 scandals started piling up, and it was, 99.9% certain that the Cain train was going off the tracks for good, well, didn't that create an opening? An opening on the Republican stage for a man of supreme self-confidence and not a lot of facts? Now, there was one small problem. Donald Trump was already a presidential candidate this year. He ran, he briefly led, he cratered, he got out in time to hang on to his TV show. Getting in a second time might have been awkward, embarrassing even. And it takes a lot to embarrass the Donald. So he probably couldn't run for the GOP nomination right now, but why shouldn't he decide who'd win it? After all, he's the Donald. Ladies and gentlemen, the Donald Trump debate. That's right, he summoned the entire field of Republican candidates to Des Moines on December 27, just a few days before the Iowa caucuses. He even had a co-sponsor, the conservative website Newsman. This debate would be moderated by Donald Trump, with questions asked by Donald Trump, with answers vetted by Donald Trump, and with an endorsement to follow shortly afterward by none other than, you're ahead of me. Foolproof, right? Nope. First, Ron Paul and John Huntsman turned him down cold. They refused to dance to the Donald's tune. I assume they had something less demeaning to do with their time. Mud wrestling? Animal sacrifice? Then Mitt Romney said he had a scheduling conflict and he wouldn't be there. Ditto for Rick Perry. Ditto for Michelle Bachmann, which left only Newt Gingrich and Rick Santorum. Not exactly must-see TV. Nice try, Donald, but that whole "the world revolves around me" act of yours, you're tired.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you so very much for watching. Stay warm. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
You know, I think the sheriff